Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments section, and subscribe to the channel to stay updated with our latest stories.
The rain had been falling for hours, steady, relentless, like a heartbeat that wouldn't slow down. It drummed against the roof, curled around the windows, and wrapped the house in a kind of trembling hush. Olivia stood at the kitchen sink, drying dishes in a trance, lulled by the rhythm, but unable to shake the strange weight pressing against her chest. There was something about storms that always made the world feel smaller, more intimate, like secrets might slip out if the walls weren't careful. But tonight the rain didn't soothe her. It unsettled her. It felt like a warning, an omen echoing through every streak on the glass, every low rumble in the distance. The streets shimmered like mirrors, and in their reflection was a version of Olivia she didn't quite recognize anymore. Restless, unsatisfied, quietly waiting for something unnamed. When the doorbell rang, sharp and jarring, her breath caught in her throat. The storm outside had found its way in. In that moment, she didn't know that everything was about to shift, that the rain was only the beginning. What waited on the other side of the door wasn't just a familiar face, but a storm of its own, cloaked in wet hair and unspoken truths. The doorbell rang again, sharp, deliberate, cutting through the hum of the rain like a blade through silk. Olivia flinched, her heart skipping a beat as she wiped her damp hands on a dish towel. It was nearly 10. Too late for packages. Too late for casual drop-ins. The sound echoed louder than it should have, as though the house itself had inhaled. She approached the door slowly, a prickle of unease crawling up her spine. When she peeked through the peephole, a familiar silhouette stood beneath the porch light. Ethan. David's best friend. The man who'd been part of their lives for almost 15 years. Relief washed over her for a second, but only for a second. He looked soaked to the bone, his dark hair plastered to his forehead, eyes shadowed and unreadable. Something about the way he stood, tense, still, made the air feel heavier. Olivia opened the door. "Ethan?" she asked, her voice uncertain, her fingers still curled around the knob. He offered a faint smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Sorry. I know it's late," he said, voice hoarse from the cold, or maybe something else entirely. I didn't know where else to go." His words hung between them, thick with something unspoken. She stepped aside without thinking, the rain hissing softly behind him. As he crossed the threshold, a subtle shift occurred, one that neither of them could name but both could feel. Whatever peace had existed in her home dissolved the moment Ethan stepped inside. Ethan stood in the entryway, dripping rain onto the hardwood floor, his eyes scanning the room like he was seeing it for the first time or maybe for the last. Olivia watched him as he shrugged off his soaked jacket, his movements slow, deliberate, as if even that simple act carried the weight of something unspoken. He looked tired, not just physically, but in a soul-deep kind of way. Gone was the version of Ethan she was used to, the witty charmer, the effortless storyteller at barbecues and game nights. In his place was a man unraveling at the edges, struggling to hold something back. She handed him a towel, their fingers brushing briefly, and he murmured a quiet thanks, eyes distant. He moved to the window and stared out at the rain as if searching for answers in the blur of water and streetlight. Olivia watched him, unsettled by the stillness between them. It wasn't the silence of comfort, it was the silence before something breaks. She offered coffee, desperate to fill the space with normalcy, but Ethan didn't look at her when he nodded. There was something coiled inside him, barely restrained. And as she busied herself at the counter, she felt the storm shifting from outside to in. This wasn't just a visit. It was the edge of a revelation. She could feel it in the way the room had changed, as if the furniture, the walls, the very air were bracing for whatever Ethan had come here to say. The coffee steamed between them, untouched. Olivia sat across from Ethan, her fingers curled tightly around her mug, but she couldn't feel its warmth. The silence stretched, taut and breathless, as if the walls themselves were waiting. Then, Ethan exhaled, shaky, like he was stepping off a cliff, and said it. "I've been in love with you for years." The words didn't land softly. They fell like thunder, shaking something deep inside her. Olivia blinked, unsure if she'd heard him right, hoping the storm outside had distorted it. But when she met his eyes, raw, exposed, filled with a truth too long buried, there was no mistaking it. She opened her mouth, then closed it, speechless. She had known Ethan nearly as long as she'd known David. They'd shared holidays, jokes, dinners. He had been her friend. Their friend. That was the line, unspoken but understood. And yet now, it lay shattered at their feet. "You've been drinking," she whispered, grasping for an explanation, a lifeline. But Ethan only laughed, low and humorless. "I wish I had. It'd be easier to blame this on something other than the truth." The air between them crackled with tension, with years of unspoken glances and silences that suddenly made too much sense. Olivia's heart pounded, not with desire but with fear, of what this confession might awaken, of what it might destroy. This wasn't a joke. This was Ethan's truth, and now it lived in her kitchen, shifting everything she thought she knew about the people in her life. And herself. Olivia sat frozen, her breath caught somewhere between her ribs and her throat, the weight of Ethan's confession pressing down on her like a wave. She wanted to deny it, to shove it back into the box it had broken free from. But something deep within her stirred. A flicker. A memory. A moment so long buried she'd nearly convinced herself it hadn't mattered. One summer night, before she and David were married, the three of them had spent the evening at a friend's lake house. David had gone to bed early. Olivia and Ethan had lingered outside, swinging lazily on the porch swing, the stars shimmering in the still water below. They'd talked for hours, really talked about books, fears, dreams they'd never say aloud to anyone else. And at one point he had looked at her, not as David's friend, but as a man seeing a woman with aching clarity. Nothing had happened. Not a word of that night was ever mentioned again. But now, in this storm-wrapped kitchen, Olivia felt that forgotten spark flare to life. She had buried it, denied it, paved over it with years of routine and loyalty. Yet here it was, resurrected. Had he carried that night with him all this time? Had she? She gripped the edge of the table, grounding herself in the present. The rain outside was deafening now, or maybe it was her heartbeat. Whatever this was between them, whatever lived in the silence, it could no longer be ignored. And that terrified her. The silence between them became a presence of its own, thick, alive, pulsing with the weight of everything that had just been said. Olivia didn't know where to look. Her eyes drifted from the untouched coffee to the rain-streaked window, to the subtle tremor in Ethan's fingers as he held the mug like it was the only thing keeping him tethered. Neither of them spoke, but everything they couldn't say filled the room like fog. The clock on the wall ticked on, painfully loud in the quiet, as if mocking the stillness that had descended between them. Ethan's confession hovered in the air, unrelenting, a raw nerve between two people who couldn't retreat into the safety of ignorance anymore. Olivia's mind raced with the implications, not just of what he felt, but of what it awakened in her. Her heart pounded in her chest, not out of excitement but panic. She felt like she was standing at the edge of something irreversible. If she acknowledged what stirred inside her, everything would change. If she dismissed it, she might never truly understand what she had just felt. It was a moment suspended in time, fragile and dangerous, like a glass about to shatter. Ethan glanced up at her, searching her face for anything. Hope, regret, rejection. But Olivia could only meet his gaze with quiet uncertainty. The silence didn't need words. It screamed of desire restrained, of timing missed, and of a truth that neither of them could ever fully take back. Olivia's mind was a battlefield of emotions. Loyalty clashing against curiosity. Love battling the echo of something that could have been. She stared down at her wedding ring. The gold band that had once felt like certainty but now felt impossibly heavy. Her life with David wasn't perfect, but it was real. It was built on years of quiet moments, shared laughter, early morning coffees and late-night conversations about nothing and everything. And yet, sitting across from Ethan, that foundation trembled beneath the weight of his truth. What terrified her most wasn't just Ethan's confession. It was the part of her that hadn't immediately pushed him away. The part that remembered that night by the lake. The part that wondered, what if? She had always seen herself as steady, grounded, but now she felt unmoored, adrift in emotions she couldn't name. Ethan wasn't asking her to leave or choose, or destroy what she'd built, but his honesty had cracked something open. And once a truth is spoken, it demands to be reckoned with. Olivia looked at Ethan, saw the quiet desperation in his eyes, The ache of years spent hiding a love he never meant to speak. Her throat tightened. She wanted to run, to flee back into the comfort of her structured life. But another part of her wanted to stay right here, in this messy, aching truth just a little longer. The tension was unbearable, the moment teetering. And for the first time in years, Olivia didn't know where her heart belonged. The morning light crept in through the blinds, pale and indifferent, casting soft shadows on the kitchen floor. Olivia moved through the motions of her routine like a ghost, measuring coffee, pouring water, listening to the familiar gurgle of the machine. But nothing felt familiar anymore. The air in the house felt thinner, like something sacred had been disturbed in the night. David sat at the kitchen table, his laptop open, a faint line of concentration on his brow as he scrolled through emails. "Morning," he said casually, not looking up. Olivia managed a reply, her voice raspy from a night spent chasing sleep she never caught. She watched him for a moment, the way his hand cradled the coffee mug, the way his lips moved slightly as he read. It was all so normal. And that's what made it unbearable. Because everything inside her was anything but. The memory of Ethan's voice, of his confession, echoed through her like a bell she couldn't unring. And yet here David was, steady as always, unaware of the storm that had passed through his home in his absence. She wondered, should I tell him? Would the truth cleanse or only wound? As she stirred cream into her cup, her hand steady, she felt a wall rising quietly between them. A wall built not from lies, but from unspoken truths. David didn't notice. He kissed her cheek, distracted, already back in his world. But Olivia felt it. The quiet fracture. And she didn't know how to fix it. The park was nearly empty. Hushed beneath a canopy of silver-gray clouds, the ground still damp from the night storm. Olivia stood at the edge of the walking path, her arms crossed tightly, more to brace herself than for warmth. Ethan was already there, sitting on a weathered bench beneath a swaying tree, hands buried in his coat pockets, eyes distant. As she approached, he looked up with a cautious smile that faded as quickly as it appeared. She sat beside him, careful to leave space between them. Though the real distance wasn't physical, it was emotional, jagged, uncertain. For a long moment neither spoke. The pond in front of them rippled quietly, disturbed only by a lone duck gliding across its surface. Then Olivia exhaled, breaking the silence. "You caught me off guard last night," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan nodded, eyes never leaving the water. "I know." She turned to face him. "Why now? Why tell me after all these years?" He was quiet for a moment before answering, his voice low and raw. "Because I saw you laughing yesterday, and I realized I'd rather carry the weight of rejection than the regret of never telling you." The confession hung in the crisp air like a fragile ornament. Olivia's heart ached. She wasn't angry, but she was torn. This was a goodbye dressed in honesty. A final offering from a man who never asked for anything more than a moment of truth. And in that moment she gave him silence and understanding. That night the house glowed softly in the dark, a quiet beacon of familiarity as Olivia stepped inside. The air smelled like David's cologne and warm fabric softener, grounding her instantly in the life they had built together. In the living room he sat on the couch, one arm draped casually along the backrest, a beer in hand, eyes focused on the muted television. "Where were you?" he asked without suspicion, his tone light. "Just went for a walk," she replied, the lie tucked gently between truths. He nodded, distracted, offering the open space beside him with a small pat. She sat down slowly, feeling the warmth of him next to her. Real, steady, unknowing. And in that stillness something clicked. This man, with his easy calm and quiet devotion, had never tried to dazzle her with grand gestures or declarations. He was her anchor in the chaos. She turned her head, studied the curve of his jaw, the faint creases near his eyes, the way he smelled like home. He sensed her gaze and turned. "What?" he asked with a smirk. Olivia's eyes softened. "Nothing," she whispered. "I love you." David blinked, momentarily surprised by the raw tenderness in her voice, then smiled, wrapping his arm around her. "I love you too, Liv." She leaned into him, eyes closed, letting the weight of the day melt into his shoulder. Whatever storm had passed, whatever questions lingered, she knew this was her answer. Not in the thrill of uncertainty, but in the peace of being truly seen. A week later, Ethan was gone. Just like that, no dramatic farewell, no lingering goodbyes. He messaged Olivia the night before his departure. A brief text that carried the weight of everything he hadn't said in person. "Take care, Olivia. I'll always be here if you need me." She stared at the message for a long time, her thumb hovering over the screen, heart tight. Then simply she replied, "You too, Ethan." It didn't feel like closure. Not really. But maybe that was the point. Some chapters don't end with punctuation, they fade, leaving behind echoes. In the days that followed, life resumed its pace. Mornings filled with coffee and emails. Evenings with quiet dinners and laughter over old TV shows. David didn't know how close everything had come to shifting. And Olivia didn't tell him. Not because she was keeping a secret, but because she had made a choice. A conscious, soul-searching decision to stay rooted in what was real. Though, when the wind stirred the trees just right or rain began to fall again, a part of her would remember. Not with longing but with clarity. She had been tested, not by betrayal, but by temptation cloaked in honesty. And she had faced it not with recklessness but with grace. Life, she realized, wasn't about the roads we never took. It was about honoring the path we walk every day, even when it trembles. Olivia hadn't chosen the spark of something forbidden. She had chosen the steady flame of something enduring. And that, in the end, was enough. In today's fast-paced world, where emotional disconnection can creep in silently, Olivia's story reminds us of the quiet strength found in conscious commitment. Temptation may arrive unexpectedly, cloaked in nostalgia or vulnerability, but true clarity comes from knowing who you are and what truly matters. When life tests your heart, pause before reacting. Reflect on the life you've built, the promises you've made, and the love that has endured through seasons of change. Sometimes the most powerful choice isn't the most thrilling one. It's the one that honors your integrity, your values, and the people who stand beside you every single day.